in this particular case, we have Chinese citizens domiciled in China. We have Chen and Jin, who are married, and they have a son, Bolin. They have assets in China, and they are looking at, the couple, Chen and Jin, are looking at immigrating to Europe, and then also acquiring European assets. So that's a situation that we have. And we'll now ask Jennifer to consider these set of facts. And talking about popular European programs, the processes that apply, the investment amounts, AML and due diligence processes. So I'll hand over to Jennifer now.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, gentlemen. So we're looking at this case study. So this couple is looking for the European programs. Currently, specifically in the China or in the regions that where I overseas, the popular European programs would be a lot for the high net worth families and the ultra high net worth families would be Malta, Cyprus. Because the benefit of getting the Cyprus or the Malta citizenship program is because first, either there's no physical residency requirements or very minimal physical requirements. And then then they are the EU members that allow them to have the right of establishment in 27 EU countries where they can work, they can go to school, and they can domicile there without applying additional visas. I think that's a lot of benefits there. And of course that offer, I mean, getting the citizenship of these two countries also offer them a global mobility to over 170 and 180 countries. If you look at Malta, basically now they offer the visa-free to the US, which is one of the options now that only has Malta offering the US. I think that's very attractive to the high net worth families, ultra high net worth families. In terms of the process to apply, Malta actually, so Henley & Partners awarded by the government as a global concessionaire to design and promote the program of Malta Individual Investor Program in 2013. The program launched it in 2014 with a quota of 1,800. And so far, closely about 70% are being approved, so roughly about 1,000 or 200 being approved. The figures given out in 2020, January this year. The process basically, if you look at the investment amount and process for Malta Individual Investor Program, they're looking at the donation, which is a 650,000 euro for the single applicant, and then the 150,000 investment could be on bonds and investment in Malta. The investment has to be held for 5 years. They will have to establish the residency by either is renting properties in Malta or purchase a property in Malta. With the minimum amount of, if it's a rental, it's like 16,000 euro a year. If purchased, 350,000 euro a year. 350,000 property as a minimum investment amount. And of course, they all need to have a insurance policy cover Malta. That's Malta. Of course, it goes through 2 stages. The clients will need to fly to Malta at the residence stage, where the Malta will give out the residence card, which is allow them to travel within the Schengen, because Malta is also a Schengen member state. And then throughout this citizenship program, which is the government will conduct the 4 tiers due diligence process. They basically look at the, first of all, they identify if the verification of the applicants, and then the source of fund, if the wealth, and then the source of the fund is coming from legitimate source. That's the 4 tiers due diligence checks that Malta has. And then after that, of course, then once the government granted the approval, then the client will complete the investment. Then they will send out the invitation to invite the applicant for the oath. That's Malta. Currently, the processing time is roughly about 15 to 18 months, depends on the cases. If you look at Cyprus, is different types of investment. Basically, they are looking at the €2 million investment on the property, and then or maybe the funds or the setting up of companies. The popular options, a lot of clients now actually doing investment on the properties, and then they'll have to donate 150,000 to the government. The investment of the property will need to be whole 5 years. The processing time relatively, I would say, faster than Malta. Currently runs about 12 to 12 months. And so they will have to invest first, and then they will grant the approval. And then also the same thing, they will have to go to Cyprus twice. And then once the approval is granted, they will need to go to the country to take the oath of allegiance. So if you look at these two programs, actually, the both country enjoys the financial benefits from the investors. And then I think if you look at the, which is the question here, the AML due diligence process, like mentioned previously, that if you look at the Cyprus actually has a direct cross-reference of the AML in their legal framework already. So, and then the banks actually has a compliance, so you have to check on the funds, to verify the funds, the source of fund, with the proof, and also have to submit it to the government. Of course, they look at the criminal records, the search in the Europol and Interpol, and then this are the process the Cyprus to look at the due diligence process. If you look at the Malta, basically I mentioned earlier, there are 4 tiers due diligence checks. They're covering the KYC, the police clearance, the source of fund, and how the clients, applicants accumulate their wealth. And then of course they will have to disclose the business and corporate affiliation, and then all the also they will look at the applicant, whether they're politically exposed person. Those are all the due diligence process the government actually is imposed for both countries. Currently, these two options are very I would say the popular options in the European EU countries right now for the high net worth families. However, Michael, if you could do me a favor to flip to the next page.
Yes,
thank you. So this is a slide that actually mentioned about the leading resident citizenship programs, because a lot of time for high net worth families or ultra high net worth families, I think we always ask the client, what's the purpose? What's the purpose of you getting a residency or citizenship programs? A lot of ultra high net worth clients, they also look at for CRS planning, tax planning in their perspectives. So we always have to mention, I think, also to remind the clients, what's the commitment you want? Because a lot of, if you look at the case study in the past, I mean, in this VRT today, a lot of them has a business in China, for example, and they are a business kingdom or enterprises in China. So a lot of time they can fulfill the physical residence requirements, so they can move, relocate. Maybe some of the family we see, they probably have the wife and children live in Canada previously or the US, and then the husband, which the breadwinner, usually have another citizenship or actually domicile in Hong Kong, Singapore, or having the Chinese nationalities. With the current trends that we see now, actually, because if you look at this page, is that there are many programs available. Like the newest one is Montenegro, which is accepted application last year. And then we have a popular options also coming from Caribbeans. Really depends on the needs. For example, a lot of clients that we see in the region, for example, Taiwan, Hong Kong, in the early days where they already obtained the US citizenship, if they need to renounce the citizenship, they would probably, depends on the timeline. If they have a shorter timeline, they probably will go for the Caribbean options, which takes only 4 to 6 months maximum application time. And the investment is roughly about 100,000 US dollar to maybe currently 250,000 US dollar. So it's a faster processing time, straightforward, and then there's no physical residence requirement. For that kind of purposes, they would probably go for Caribbean. So that currently we see this Caribbean option is also an interim solutions because residence and citizenship planning nowadays for the high net worth families is something I would say quite important because changing of the citizenship or changing the residency basically do have some impacts in terms of succession planning, wealth planning, even in the trust structures. So choosing the right one, firstly, they look at the legal basis, the global mobility, the taxation background of the countries, the timeline, and also the economic stability the purposes we have to look in. And of course, the timeline I mentioned earlier. So Caribbean, we see actually the interim solution. We see a lot of clients actually doing on the same time with the Caribbean option as the interim, and they also apply Cyprus and Malta as the long run, because like I mentioned earlier, both countries, the member of the EU, they allow the freedom of establishment within the 27 countries to offer the visa-free global to 180 or 170 countries. So the global mobility also gives them the freedom to travel within the whole, I mean, for the business, maybe purposes, for other purposes. And the tax background of these two countries are also quite beneficial. So I think besides the citizenship, we always advise clients also to look into the residence, because when you mentioned about domicile, a lot of clients will also look at where's your tax domicile residency. So a lot of clients, our platform, they also have, they choose the Hong Kong or Singapore as their tax domicile. So which is, I think, which all the gentlemen has mentioned, Hong Kong, Singapore has very good attractive taxation schemes that attract a lot of high net worth coming into both jurisdictions on that. So I think choosing residence and citizenship program really depends on the needs of the clients and what are the commitments they can commit into it. Of course, that also have to look at the application process from the government side, and then the DD due diligence nowadays with the transparency with the banking and the financial industry and the world. I think we really need to be really upfront to explain how you accumulate your wealth, where's the source of fund. This is what the government is looking at. So I think this will conclude my a very short brief and summary of my presentation.
Thanks very much, Jennifer. And they were very, very good points. And I quite agree that there are a lot of areas where there's overlapping, because even from a trust perspective, tax is always an issue, and also domicile and residency is also a very important issue. So quite often when we're planning trust for clients, we also ask them, do they have any plans to immigrate to any particular countries? Because that will determine the parameters of our trust planning as well too. So I agree, there's a lot of overlap in all these different areas, and also you know, what Dr. Gong and John and Zach talked about as well. Very much a lot of overlap in all the various different areas.